We're going to take a look at two different word problems. Both of them deal with interest rates, and earnings. And the second one here deals with interest rate. We have earning, but we also have a loss. So the second one gets a little bit more involved. Okay, and much like some of the previous word problems, for instance, we worked on one that had this formula: distance is equal to rate times time. Okay. I'll be using a similar approach with these categories and such. But instead of distance, rate, and time, in this case, we're going to be using the formula interest is equal to principal times rate times time. And this is just as the previous formula. Let me pull that in again. Distance is equal to rate times time. This is a very common formula. You will encounter it a lot, so you should become familiar with it. This formula is quite common whenever you're working with interest rates and investments. Okay? For our purposes, the time is going to be 1 year, annual simple interest. So since time is just a 1, we're going to get to ignore that last variable. So we'll really only have to focus to I equals PR. Principal, that's how much you invest. Rate, that's the percentage. Okay? And then interest, that's how much you make. Alright, so let's see if we can get our categories situated here. We have a 4% investment and a 9% investment. I'll zoom out just a touch. Okay, so we have 4% invest and 9% invest. Alright, and those are the two categories. We use this chart to help organize our thinking. We're not necessarily going to use these numbers from right here. That's why I've drawn the little arrows. It's just our categories. So these are just the categories. And then let's see, we're trying to get some variables introduced here. He invests $35,000, but we don't know how much he put in the 4%. We don't know how much he put in the 9%. But this is sort of the key. We're going to build it around this. That all of this $35,000 got invested. And this is kind of a cool trick. I can't say, for let's say the 4% investment, I can't say that he invested $35,000, but I could say he invested $35,000 minus some amount, and however much he didn't put at 4%, he put that down here at the 9%. And by the way, I could have done this. I could have said I could have written 35,000 down here, subtracted X, and then just had a lonely X up top. Okay, that part is arbitrary. It might seem strange, but as we say, it just works itself out in the wash. And let's see, so I'll say amount invested. Alright, so that's our amount invested. And again, we're going to focus on this formula, okay? We're going to get to ignore time, so I'll just kind of cross that out. again, it's going to be 1 year, and when you multiply by 1, nothing happens. So principal, that's how much you invest, okay? The amount invested, that's right here. That's our principal, okay? Maybe I'll just put this here. I'll put the in quotations, all right? That's the principal. And then the rate, okay? We have our rates right here. But instead of writing 4%, I want to write this as a decimal. So that's 4 hundredths, and 9% is 9 hundredths, and this is the rate. And then I is the interest, but let me see. Well, I have the yearly interest from both accounts was this. If I try the same trick that I used, I'll have to introduce a new variable. I don't want that. So instead of writing the interest as a fixed dollar amount or something with a variable, this might seem a little tricky to you, but I'm going to write the interest as just principal times rate. Okay? So the principal is all that stuff times the rate. So this would be 4 hundredths times 35,000 minus x. I should say the quantity 35,000 minus x. Okay, so this is 4 hundredths times the quantity 35,000 minus x, and then this one's a little bit friendlier. 9 hundredths x. Okay, and I mentioned this in earlier videos. We're not going to use all of these numbers as they sit in our calculation. This chart is just to help us organize our thinking. But we are able to write an algebraic equation now. And think about this. If the interest from both accounts was $3,050, and this describes the interest from the first investment, this describes the interest from the second investment. If I add these two, I'm supposed to get $3,050, and that's how we'll write our algebraic equation. Okay? I have to slide this up now. A lot to write. Keep on the same line. Plus this. Okay. And I really don't feel like dealing with these decimals, so I'm going to clear this of decimals. If I move this 2 decimal places and move this 2 decimal places, we'll be fine. Remember, whatever's in parentheses is essentially protected, so I have to do the same thing on each side of the equation. I'll multiply by 100, 100, and 100. So 100 times 4 hundredths is 4. One hundred times 9 hundredths is 9. Bring down your x. And here we just have to tack on these last 2 zeros. Right. I'm multiplying by 100, but you don't really have to go through all the calculation if you know the shortcut. Alright, we're still trying to get x by itself, and we've got a ways to go. We're going to have to send the 4 in to each term. It's a little bit of work. 2 times 35 is 70. If I double 70, I get 140. So I'll write, and then all I have to do is bring down those 3 zeros. Okay, so again, this is a shortcut you can use, and I encourage you to use it. Let's see, we can combine like terms. Slide everything up a little bit here. So negative 4x, positive 9x, this leaves us with 5x. And I need a sign here, that's a positive 5x. Okay, because it was addition or subtraction, so I need to preserve that operation. And finally, let's get rid of that 140,000. So on this side, we're just left with our 5x, and over here, and one more step. You got to get x by itself, divide by 5, divide by 5. Obviously 5 goes into itself once, and we figured out that x is equal to, I'm going to try this without writing it all out. 5 goes into 16 3 times, and I have 15, that's another 3, and I have to use up those zeros. Alright, so we figured out that x is 33,000. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. We have to see what are they asking. Alright, x is 33,000. So I will, let's see, we'll use red. No, I'll use the blue. Alright, so we have to check again what they're asking. But remember that x is 33,000. Alright, so let's see what they're asking us to do with our information here. Find the amount invested at each rate. This is where the amount invested sits. So we have to plug 33,000 into this, and nothing will change. So that's $33,000 at 9%. Okay, and then here I need to plug in 33,000 where the x is. So I'll have 35,000 minus 33,000, and that will leave us with just $2,000 at the 4% investment. Okay, that's just, it was a pretty conservative amount to put in there at 4%. Looks like old Larry was hoping for big winnings here. Alright, taking a look at this one, we've got a investment, some percentage of profit. It's actually a percentage of loss, but we want this formula to sort of go through your mind. Interest is equal to principal times rate times time, and this formula is used quite a bit, not only in your math classes, but the reason we use it in math classes is this is used in banking and investing. Okay, for the problems that you're going to encounter the time, we start out with a friendlier approach, as much as that might amaze you. Time is usually 1 year. Okay, so if we multiply by 1, nothing happens. So you can essentially ignore that time for now. Eventually we'll say over 2 years or 5 years, and you'll have to, it'll get a little bit more complicated. Okay. All right, now let's see. We want to set up our categories. So what are we talking about? We've got a fund that paid a 12% profit, and a stock that suffered a 3% loss. And that loss we're going to have to account for, okay? But let's just say fund of 12%, okay? And again, this is just a category. We're not really going to do a calculation here. This is just to help us organize our thinking. And then we have stock. And that was a 3% loss. Okay, so 3%, and that'll be going in this category. But we have to account for the loss. Okay? So I'm going to put negative 3%, okay, because we lost at the rate of 3% on that one. So we've mentioned our categories. And we need some variables in here, okay? To accomplish that, she invested $39,000. I would just like to earn $39,000, let alone invest $39,000. All right, so she invested $39,000, and I can't say that she invested $39,000 at 12% or $39,000 at a 3% loss. But here's the cool trick. I can say that she invested $39,000 minus some amount. And whatever she didn't put at the 12%, she did put down here where there was a loss. All right. So I'll say amount invested I don't know, maybe there's a better way to say that, but that's what occurs to me. And to help you kind of get used to it, that's what we call the principal. All right, so I'll just put that there. And let's see where our chart is going here. Okay, now to work on the next category, I have the amount invested, or the principal, but I'm also going to need the rate. Okay. And we know that this is 12%, so I'll write that just as a decimal. That's 12 hundredths. And for the stock, that's 3%. It is a negative. All right. So first, to change it to the 3% to a decimal is 3/100ths. But this loss has to be represented in our calculation. Okay, so be absolutely sure you keep up with that. And then for our final category here, for the interest, it might seem a little confusing when you have a loss to call that interest, but this is the amount left at the end. I could call it profit or lost. I actually could even call it the interest. I suspect you can have negative interest. Anyway, I don't have an easy way to represent this. I can't put in this $480. I could use the same trick we used here, but I would have to introduce a brand new variable, and that would get a bit unwieldy. So let's just represent it as the principal times the rate. Okay? So that would be 12 hundredths times the quantity, 39,000, minus x. And then this one is going to be a negative 3 hundredths times x. Basically, we have what we need to write an algebraic equation now. Her overall net profit was $480. Okay? So if I combine this amount, it might not look like an amount, but this is an amount, with this amount, if I combine them, I add them, I'm going to get $480. Okay? So that's how we'll write our algebraic equation. So we've got 12 hundredths times quantity, 39,000, minus x, plus a negative 300ths x. I'm just going to write minus 300ths x. Okay? If you want to write it with two signs, you're welcome to. And I don't want to keep having to deal with all these decimals, so I'm going to clear this equation of decimals. So I will multiply by 100, multiply by 100, and multiply by 100. Okay? So 100 times 12 hundredths is, make sure I'm not running out of room here, simply 12. And we still have our parentheses. And then 100 times 3 hundredths is 3. 100 times 480 is 480, and all we have to do is tack on those two zeros. Okay? It's a nice, fast, easy way to solve the problem, or at least that calculation. Alright, we have to get rid of our parentheses. Again, I'm just going to use a shortcut. 12 times 39, we'll do that over, I'll do that over here. Multiplying by 1. Okay, so that's 9, 3, 9, 3. So we get 468. So 12 times 39. And these three zeros, I just tack them on. Okay. Bring down everything. Well, let's see. We have 12 times x. We can combine like terms. Bring everything else down. And normally at this point I would subtract 468,000, but I won't be able to work it. If I just put it down here, I'll have to rearrange it just to subtract. I'm actually going to do two steps at once here. I'm going to add 15x to each side. Usually I just do one step, but I think we're going to go a little bit more sophisticated. I'm going to add 15x to each side. And on the same line, I'm going to subtract 48,000 from each side. That'll make life a little bit easier. So this leaves us with 15x. And this leaves us with 420,000. One more step, we have to get rid of that 15. Divide by 15. Goes in 15 once, so we have x equals, and I'm going to do this one on a separate piece of paper. So we have 15's going to have to divide into 420,000 goes into 42 two times. Bring down our 0. Okay, 15. A good way to think of it: 2 times 15 is 30. 3 goes into 12 4 times. I'm going to try 8 times 15, and that might be the one we're looking for. That's 8, that's 12. So 8 worked. But be careful, you have to use up all of the zeros. 15 goes into 0, 0 times. 15 goes into 0, 0 times. 15 goes into 0, 0 times. So we ended up with 28,000. Okay? So x is equal to 28,000. And we are not finished yet. Alright, so we'll zoom out a little bit and try to take a look at the question and what we're to do with this information. Alright. Alright, so we need to keep up with our x equals 28,000. Write that here. And we need to focus on what have they asked us? What's the real question? Find the amount of each investment. Okay. So investment, that's how much what was the principal really? How much did they put in? Or how much did she put in? All right. So for the 12% fund, it was 39,000 minus x, which is 28,000. So that's 39 $1,000, and we'll have to subtract $28,000. She put 11,000 in there. All right. And then on the stock fund, where she lost 3%, that's just our X, which we said is $28,000. Well, looks like even though she started with 39,000, she invested 11,000 and made some money, but she invested 28,000 and lost a lot.